So we break up our training into primary movement patterns or muscle groups. So we're not bound to a particular training tool. So I think of a training tool as barbell, machine, kettlebell, TRX, any one of these things. When you know the movement pattern, you can train across and use any tool to train that muscle group. Now, a lot of us get really kind of focused on one particular tool, and this is the answer to everything, whether it be the kettlebell or whether it be barbells or machines or whatever it is. Like, you love your thing that you do, right? Now, I want to encourage you to focus on just improving the movement pattern itself, and the way we load it. We can experiment with different ways to load this, right? But it's more important that you're preserving the movement pattern. And then eventually, if you want to, when you're ready to get back into the barbells or you want to get back into machines or kettlebells or whatever it is, that it's all going to translate over. This stuff transcends whatever training equipment you're using. So for this first challenge, what I'm trying to do is let's break everything up into primary movement patterns each day. I want you to focus on that movement pattern and then play around with exercise variations that allow you to do that movement pattern. Your squat's going to be working things like, your quads, hamstrings, glutes, calves. Now you've got two different squatting patterns. You've got more of like a hip dominant pattern where there's tends to be a little bit more of a forward lean in your squat, and more of an upright torso squat where you're like, we call things like front squats or high bar squatting. And then there's also a jumping pattern, which is considered a squat as well, right? Hinging or deadlift patterns. These are going to be more like posterior chain dominant glutes, things like deadlifts, good mornings, hinge, swings, like kettlebell swings, glute bridges, hip thrusts. These are all considered in that hinge family of movement. Now, horizontal pressing, these are going to be things that are working your chest, shoulders, triceps, depending on how you do it. Might hit like a different muscle group as a priority, and others, they're all three of those are going to get worked pretty good. But these are going to be things like your more traditional bench press or a floor press. You could do these with dumbbells or a barbell, obviously, right? Or we can do things in body weight where we're doing a push-up. Horizontal pulls is going to be the opposite of that. We're going to be working like rhomboids, lats, low traps, hopefully, if you're doing it right, where we're dumping those shoulder blades back and down instead of letting those traps come up. Now, these are going to be things like rows, or what I call the saw, where we're actually loading either some type of load and we're upright in a sitting position, pressing out away from your body, forcing you to engage all of those lower traps, lats, rhomboids in or a movement pattern that you don't normally do. It's very similar to a row, but you're using the weight out against gravity and then back in. A vertical pressing pattern. These are going to be more shoulder and tricep dominant. This is things like your overhead press or a pike push-up. So this is more of almost like a push-up where you're kind of bent over and loading up those shoulders a little bit more. Handstand positions or handstand push-ups and that kind of thing. A vertical pulse is going to be the opposite of that vertical pressing movement where you're going down. So these are more traditionally things like pull-ups, lat pull-downs. Now, I kind of dumbbell pullovers or some type of loaded pullover in that category because we're using a ton, even though we're using a bunch of triceps here as well, we're going to be working a bunch of that lat, pulling it through a range of motion. And another alternative for you at home is going to be something like a long arm kickback. Now, let me see if I can actually fit myself in the screen here, but a long arm kickback where your normal kickback is going to be mainly tricep focused, kicking back here. The long arm, we get a nice long lever. So we're including both the lat in with that tricep there too. So another way to kind of hit that lat muscle or those low traps and rhomboids and a little bit of biceps in there too, depending on if you're doing pull-ups or lat pull-downs, we're going to probably hit a little bit more biceps there. We've got a full body pattern. Now, I consider these things like snatches, one arms or two arm snatches. So you obviously do these things with dumbbells or a water jug, cleans and presses, squats, cleans and presses, thrusters. So thruster is something like a squat into a press where you're pressing up in one motion. Now, if you don't have anything there, you can always do things like burpees. Burpees suck, but whatever. It gives us an option when you don't have any training equipment. Now, let's move on to our secondary movements and muscle groups. So things like a single leg squat. Now, a single leg squat, I kind of consider things like lunges, step ups, split squats, pistol squats. Now, you could choose any one of those. Single leg stuff sucks. I get it. There requires a lot more balance, but most of our life is done on single leg, right? You're running, you're jumping, all that stuff. Most of the time, you're doing it off of one leg. So I think it's really important to train that movement pattern. Now, one thing you can do here, and what I recommend for all of you guys is this is a great opportunity, get out of your shoes, get your toes on the ground, like get out of your socks as well, and then grip those toes into the ground. That's going to create a lot more stable platform for you to build off of and do these exercises. Again, grip the toes. You want to create as stable as a platform. You want to try to fire everything in your leg when you're doing things like single leg squats, or like I said, lunging patterns, step ups. You're working on your balance. You're working on everything. Now, if you get more stable on one leg, odds are you're going to get a little bit even more stable on two legs. Those concepts translate over. It's your ability to create tension and stability through the system that's going to get you stronger over time. Single leg hinging movements. Now, these are going to be things mimicking the deadlift. Again, these are challenging, but use this as an opportunity to work that balance. Now, you can always, if like a single leg deadlift is too hard, or you find out yourself wobbly over time, it's okay to use some assistance. Use a chair as a guide. You can hold onto that chair, go through the range of motion, grip those toes, and you're working through this pattern in your brain to make it more stable over time. So for most of you that are used to just kind of cranking out exercises, I encourage you to take your time on this stuff. Let's focus on the quality of movement, make things look sexy. And to do that, you have to kind of take it slow sometimes. Feel where your body is in space, get your like everything moving as a unit, and like I said, you'll basically groove that pattern, and then you can add speed and more weight over time. But use this. This is a great opportunity. You're forced to train from home. You don't have the heavy weights. There's no one around you to show off to. You can like put the ego aside and just work on quality of movement. Now, again, single leg hinges could also be things like deadlifts, glute bridges, so a single leg glute bridge or single leg hip thrust as well. Lateral lunging, I think, is an important pattern, a lot of times left out of different training programs, but these are going to be things like, we call it adductor complex, where we go side to side, or a lateral lunge variation. Our core ab movements now, not necessarily stable, because hopefully with all these big training things, you're activating your core and abs through everything that you're doing, but we'll add some of this stuff in there too. I think it makes a lot of people happy when they're doing some direct ab work. So things like planks, crunch variations, whether it's reverse, dragon flags. We've got some more complicated ab work like Turkish sit-ups, Turkish get-ups. I kind of call these things like more full body integration based exercise, things like bear crawls. So we'll play around with a bunch of those things. I have a movement pattern that I call the single arm shoulder swing. So these are going to be, they start as things like lateral raises, but you're actually using your whole body to kind of kip that weight up through a range of motion. Now it allows you to use a little bit more load, but we're trying to get the body to work as a unit to swing the weight up and down purposely, right? Some might call it like a cheat lateral raise or a cheat reverse fly, but we're going to be purposeful here. We're trying to get the body to work as a unit to swing through a range of motion, and we can add a little bit of load there. We'll go through all of that stuff. And then some obviously supporting muscle groups, some of the vanity muscles like your biceps, triceps, glutes, calves, those kind of things. And then we've also got some like slower, more methodical shoulder and back accessory that we include in the programs as well. So again, this first program, we want to make sure that we're doing just like one, max 2 movement patterns a day. We start off with one here, play around with different exercise variations based on what you have at home, understand the movement first, then you can like load the exercise over time. And I want to get you some practice first before we go into our first program, which is going to sling together multiple movement patterns and exercise variations, complicate the rep scheme a little bit more to make things a little bit more challenging and more fun.